Let's talk about reading. With all the noise of technology and social media, what is happening to literacy and our kids' ability to read? Like actually properly read. I'm not talking about text messages or abbreviated Instagram posts. Is reading doomed to mutate as technology evolves? Or can we still teach our kids to curl up with a good book? My guest this week is Miss Michelle Ruhe, former teacher, literacy coach, and founder of Coach from the Couch. We discuss how literacy has transformed in recent years and the factors that are leading to its demise. And yes, COVID is mentioned once again. Ms. Ruhe gives us some tips and best practices on how to effectively teach our students how to properly read, some of which will actually surprise you. Hello, teachers from around the world, and welcome to Legendary Educator, the podcast that helps you improve your performance in the classroom and have more engaged and motivated students. My name is Ramis Takawi. I'm a teacher and instructional coach, and I created this podcast because I'm passionate about education and about students achieving their highest potential. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss any future episodes as they drop. All right, let's get to know our guest this week.
Hello, I am Michelle Ruhe. I am a literacy coach in a tiny town in South Carolina. And my students that I used to have and the students that I see every day in classrooms call me Mrs. Ruhe. Let's see, I've been in education. This is my 23rd year. I would have to say that growing up, my favorite teacher was one of my teachers in high school, actually. Her name was Mrs. Welty. And she's a little unique because she was actually a favorite teacher of my dad when he was in high school. And my dad is actually an important part of my journey. So she was just the most gentle, tiny, quiet, but mighty teacher you'd ever meet. And she helped me grow in just so many ways as a scholar and as a human. So I will never forget her.
So, Michelle, thank you for joining me today. I do appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. So can you please tell us a little bit about your journey in education and, how you ended up as a literacy coach for teachers?
So I knew pretty early on that I wanted to be a teacher. I was one of those quintessential kids who lined up all the stuffed animals and taught them with the chalkboard. It was that kid for sure.
My daughter does that.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a sign.
It's a sign. But for a very brief time, actually, I thought I wanted to be an attorney. So then I kind of went down that path a little bit, but I came right back to teaching when I became, I was in high school, a Sunday school teacher. And I think I did it for about 2 weeks and I was hooked. This is it. All of it, the lesson planning, the kids, everything, seeing their smiling faces. So that was early in high school when I knew I wanted to do that. And so I just went on that path, and literacy quickly became my passion. And it comes from actually my dad. He, as a child, really had a hard life, and he didn't have anybody there to advocate for him, and grew up not liking reading, hating it actually, and really kind of struggling with it. And I always remember thinking, if he would have had someone to be there for him, to show him the way, his life could have had a completely different path. So I just always vowed to be that person. So most of the schools that I've taught in, I've chosen for them to be like title schools as much as possible. Although I have experience in highly affluent as well, my heart is with those kids who are in those higher needs schools, because they also need somebody to advocate for them. So I did that for a number of years. I started out actually, I pretty much went this beautiful trajectory: kindergarten, then I looped to first grade, then I looped to second grade, and then I went to fourth grade. And I did that very, very intentionally so that I could see how literacy develops over time. And it was great because when I got to the upper grades, I could see where the breakdown was and I knew what to do about it because I'd had that strong background. So then, I stayed 15 years of classroom experience, and I loved every minute of it. But then more and more, I started working one-on-one with teachers and collaborating with them and sort of training them. And I just loved that. I loved that as much as I loved the classroom. So then I started looking at doing that, and I became an interventionist in literacy, K-5, for about 5 years, where there was a lot of coaching involved with that, when I was setting goals with kids and progress monitoring and what are your next steps. And then lo and behold, a position as an actual literacy coach came open, and here I am.
And so you work for?
I work for a public school. I'm in a small town, but it's really growing tremendously, and it's K-5.
What is Coach on the Couch?
So Coach from the Couch
From the
is,
couch, yeah.
I love coaching so much, and I love just helping as many teachers as I can. And there's just so much rhetoric out there and confusion and noise that I just thought, I'd like to do this more. Just like when I wanted to become a coach, it was because I wanted to have a greater impact. Because you do have a greater impact with so many more potential reach to kids than just in one classroom. So I wanted to expand that. And so I thought, why not be somebody who can be available online, provide resources, provide coaching for others who may not have a coach in their building, or who may not even, be comfortable with the coach that they might have. I just want to be there to help as many coaches as I can.
That's fantastic. Okay. So what exactly do you coach the teachers on?
So I'm technically a literacy coach. And I say technically because there's a lot wrapped up in just working with children. There's management, there's dealing with their SEL needs. There's a lot there, and there's a lot there just with adult learning too. So yes, I'm literacy, but I'm also working through coaching through change, and I'm working with meeting adults where they are. So it's all kind of wrapped up in that, but it's definitely primarily literacy focused.
What kinds of challenges do you see teachers facing in your sort of line of work of coaching teachers? If it's only literacy, is it something else? Like how, what is the struggle that is most in demand for you?
I feel like that's such a loaded question.
It is.
Because, well, literacy itself is so multifaceted. I always call it like the spider web of curriculum. Everything's so tied together, right? And then there's so many, you can go so deep with all of that. But right now in the world, there's all of this back and forth about what actually is reading and how is the best way to teach it. And there's so much vitriol out there, and so many feelings and opinions out there that really get in the way of what really is at the core of strong literacy instruction. So I feel like right now in this moment in time, that is my role, is to help, like, literally hold the teacher's hands and help them through all this, the weeds of what's going on right now, so that they can remain, focused on what matters for kids. Another thing that really compounds the confusion out there, I think it's all the technology that we have. People get so wrapped up in the slides and the products and the downloads and the things, and it gets just to be overwhelming if you just clear some of that away and just get down to the simple, what is best instruction, we would reduce so much overwhelm. So that's the other major piece of what I do, is I help teachers reduce the overwhelm by cutting through the clutter and just getting down to the simple things.
What is the clutter? What is the noise that you're talking about?
So, well, there's a couple places. So the clutter is, and I think a lot of it, most of it really is tied to social media. Like, the first thing teachers do when they get their new classroom or they get their first job is get on Pinterest.
Of course.
And you see all these beautiful classrooms, and oh my gosh, they're expensive as all get out. They, and they're so time consuming to put together, but none of that actually makes a difference in terms of student learning. None of it. But it causes you to sit up at, till 2 a.m. for weeks on end, cutting out lamination. So there's that, like, keeping up with the Joneses aspect of it. And then there's also so much on a teacher's plate. Of course, it's a very busy job. It's nonstop. And we're always looking for, how do we make it simpler for us. But then you get into this trap of, now we go to teachers pay teachers, and I need this, I need this, I need this. And all you're doing is downloading until your computer storage is full.
Right.
And you get lost in that. Like, you don't even remember what you have. And so many times, it's so simple. One of my favorite examples, this just came up on social media. I was in a Facebook group, and somebody said, I'm really stuck for how to teach quotation marks. And you wouldn't believe, there was all these people saying, download this, get this program. And I was like, how about you just put a book under the document camera and show them how quotation marks work? So we get just very, very bogged down in all of the things because we're not focused on the why first. So that's what I try to do. Get back down to what's the why and how do we get there?
Keep something in mind too. Ever since I've ventured into this content creator sort of space of education, I'm noticing this, or TPT, teachers pay teachers. And so I'm just assuming, when a teacher who's got a space, a TPT space, when somebody asks a question, hey, that's a cha-ching, that, I mean, that's opportunity for a sale right there. So I don't think, sharing has become a communal thing or a community thing anymore. Now sharing is a business for teachers, especially because, as we know, teachers are pretty underpaid. And so it's any way to, sort of make an extra buck here or there.
Yeah. And a lot of it really, contributes to the overwhelm because it's not right. There's mistakes all over the place in them, or they're meant for the masses. So they don't really align with your standards. And then you're kind of doing too much or doing it in a way that's not meant to be done in your state. It really more headache than it's worth many times.
Okay, so you mentioned best practices. What are some of the best practices for teachers?
So number one, stepping away from that PowerPoint and getting in front of your kids and looking them in the eye, and just really getting down with them. And that starts with knowing your kids. That starts with assessing them in, a multitude of ways, not just one diagnostic tool that you're given from your curriculum. Maybe some student interviews or rating scales or engagement inventories, just getting to know them in many aspects. And then looking at your curriculum and saying, okay, here's what I'm given, but where are my kids in relation to that? We so often just jump into the curriculum and turn the page, but we have to remember that every group is different, especially lately. And I hate to keep you saying this, but COVID really did make an impact on kids' behavior and their learning. So we don't have the same kids today that we did even 3-4 years ago. Because I'm in classrooms every day, I do see this. It is true. So this is hard for many teachers. If you've been in your same role for let's say 5 years, those kids that you had were kind of status quo, let's say, and your curriculum may have worked, but now they're not the same kids. But you can't just jump into the curriculum. You've got to look at where your students really are. And that can make it less overwhelming, actually, because if you're trying to teach to, at point Z, when your kids are really at point D, you got to figure that out first.
Can we dive a little bit deeper into this? How has COVID affected students' reading skills, reading abilities?
It's really affected, more than anything, their self-efficacy, I would say. They've been, their parents really did a lot for them, or they didn't have to do a lot.
As much as they could.
Right. So they're not used to things being difficult or working for them. And their attention spans, oh my goodness, their attention spans are not the same. So that kind of is a perfect storm for kids who are just overwhelmed and don't know how to handle themselves. And that really affects the reading because they're not as engaged, they aren't as invested, and it's harder. And because I was an interventionist at that time, trying to teach literacy intervention over Zoom to kindergartners, and that's pretty hard. So they're also lacking a lot of skills for sure. So all of this is kind of this big churning of big things that have happened in terms of their behavior, their social awareness, their self-efficacy, and their skills. And it's all coming together in lower ability to read. And so it takes more work for the teachers, certainly. So I feel like that's where we are, but it's not as bad as math, I'm hearing.
Not as bad as math, eh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you find that social media, or like reading off of social media, reading, text messages, Instagrams, or that has affected students' ability to actually read proper sentences?
Oh, there's no doubt. Especially, I mean, you go to any restaurant at dinner time and look around. You will not find a 2-year-old that does that in their hands. And so, there's a lot of research out there about just the digital world and what that does to the brain, and kind of creates that like ADD brain, really. So we've got these kids who've grown up on devices who are training them to have extremely short attention spans. So that's one of the reasons I think why so many kids gravitate towards those graphic novels. They don't, and there's nothing wrong with those, but a completely 100% steady diet of that, when there's not much substance to them, is really not helping kids grow as readers as much as they should be. But I think that social media, that just technology aspect in general, has greatly contributed to that shorter attention span, and they don't have the ability to stick with an actual book for very long.
Evolution is a very real thing, whether positive or negative. Is the evolution of reading going towards more electronic media? Are books eventually going to lose their place on the shelf?
I think if we let it, it will. I think it can. I mean, I myself, I have the Kindle on my bedside table and I love it. But I also have right beside it a stack of 4 actual books. So, and there is a lot to be said. I know Marianne Wolf, she writes in Reader Come Home, she writes about how important it is that kids really are in actual books, because it's just better for your brain to be able to focus that way. Even the lighting is hard on a body. And then when we're thinking about like young children who need to learn how to turn the pages of a book and how that works, they're not doing that with all that electronic media. So I don't think it's a terrible thing to have that, certainly, but I think we've got to try as educators to make sure there's a balance there, so that they are doing, the great thinking that print and actual print can allow you to do. There's a lot of research out there on that you just focus a lot better when there's a physical book or text in front of you. Also, like, we can't annotate very well in anything electronic. And so school related things, we're asking kids to take notes and things like that. It really is important that they physically can do that and put the sticky note on there. They'll lose it if it's just on a device.
Yes or no? Is it inevitable?
Yes.
10 years, 20 years, maybe 50 years, who knows? But are paper books inevitably going to disappear eventually?
I want to say no, but I'm thinking about newspapers, and we're already there.
That's gone. All right.
Right.
Magazines are gone.
Right. But I still think we can slow it as much as possible. We can, support authors, and we can develop big classroom libraries, and that love of reading and holding a book in your hands and just getting lost in that book. I think as educators, we can protect that. Can we stop it from disappearing? I don't know. I hope not, but I kind of feel like 25, 30 years from now, the answer will be yes.
Right before I retired from teaching, the wave that I noticed was textbooks on tablets. Every single textbook that you need on a tablet. I mean, is that a sign of things to come?
I think it is. And so, what comes with that is we're going to have to, of course, train our kids how to make the most of it and how to get as much as they can out of it. The sad reality, though, is their brains are at the same time not developing the same way as you and I did with physical books in our hands. So there's always going to be that shortage of attention, and we're going to have to continue to deal with that as educators with the advent of digital only text, for sure. And we have to train ourselves to how to train kids to really get the most of it. Right now, it's all too easy to say, okay, go on Epic and read, but there's so much to how to look for just the right thing, and how we still have to teach them how to make just right choices and appropriate choices, and think as they read, and pause. That's what's hard about it, is when we have a physical book, it's so much easier to kind of just look up for a minute and process. But in a digital text, it's all too easy just to keep turning those pages, and you get a little passive. So it will take more work on our part.
That's evolution, though. Like if you like it or not, I do believe. I mean, on a personal note, I believe that's where we're going, right? So,
yeah.
And since we're going there, do you think that it's actually better for a teacher to see that end result and work with where we're going instead of against where we're going?
Yeah. And I think this is a lot like Chat GPT right now. That's another
That's
thing.
a whole new thing, which I still don't know what that is.
Yeah. And there's like, you can be afraid of it, and you can run from it and
It's
shut your
here.
eyes and hope
It's
it
here.
doesn't come. It's
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
But you can also learn about it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you learn about it, no matter what the thing is, you can learn to embrace it and get in front of it, and learn how to make it work for you and for your students. Like, I actually think there's a lot of benefit to Chat GPT in terms of teaching kids like how to revise and how to improve their writing. It's almost like a tutor for them. However, there have to be parameters. And so if you don't have parameters in place, because you don't really understand what can happen, then you're going to be ill prepared. So I always think whatever's coming, with me, it's this whole movement towards science of reading, right? If you don't know what's coming and what all it entails, you can't get ahead of it. But if you embrace it and learn as much as you can, then you're so much better positioned to make it meaningful and make it impactful. You're going to have to make some shifts for sure, but you can absolutely make it all work and make it a benefit to students. It just takes some training.
3 tips for teachers to better improve the students' reading outcome.
Number 1, find out where they really are with a variety of measures, and not just like how many words a minute they can read. I'm talking engagement and what they like to read, like all that kind of thing too.
Don't assume a student's level just because they're in grade 2, for example, they're going to read at a grade 2 level.
Oh, absolutely. So find out where they are. Number 2, it's like not another assumption, I guess. Don't assume that your curriculum is going to be everything that you need. Curriculum is always made for the masses. So it's one size fits all, which means it usually doesn't fit many. So in order to know where you can tailor your curriculum, what you need to supplement, what you need to take away, you need to know where your kids are. Then you know how that curriculum can be best tailored to meet their needs. It's students first, not curriculum first. And I think slow down. Teachers get so wrapped up in the calendar and in the clock.
Yes.
But if you are starting from where they are and you're tailoring your curriculum according to where they are, you're not going to run out of time. But if you're jumping ahead to, I've got to get through page 200 by, the end of the month, then you're always going to be racing the clock. So I think it starts with kids always, then you go to your curriculum, and then the time will follow. It doesn't. And I think right now we go in the opposite direction.
And tip number 3.
Tip number 3, I think it would be great. Give yourself grace. Teaching is really hard and ever changing. And that's an opportunity for us to learn and grow. And it doesn't mean you're bad at it or wrong. I love what Steve Barkley says. He says there's no apex in teaching, and there's not. You're always growing, and it's okay. It's not a bad reflection on you. It's a sign that you're actually becoming a strong educator. So be open to learning.
If you're meeting a teacher going into the classroom for the first time next semester, what advice would you give them?
Don't compare yourself to your neighbor, especially if it's a veteran, and maybe stay off Pinterest for a little bit. I mean, you got to it takes so much time. You don't come out of the gate as a veteran, amazing teacher. I've been in this for 23 years and I'm still not the teacher that I envisioned to be. I have lots of room to grow, and we all do. So give yourself grace.
And finally, what was your biggest frustration as a teacher?
Gosh, I would have to say and it was my own fault sometimes. Parents didn't always understand. And I say it's my own fault because everything boils down to communication. So now I know that, again, you got to get ahead of things. You have to explain everything, where you're going and why, not just what you're doing, but why you're doing it. So like I can think about math, for example, when Common Core came out. Oh my gosh, people were just up in arms, this new math, it's ridiculous and blah, 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 blah. But if we would have been more proactive in explaining the why, I think there would have been a whole lot fewer questions. So I think that was a frustration that I had once in a while. But it all boiled down to communication. It always does.
If somebody wants to reach out to you for information or to, set something up with you coaching wise, where would they find you?
So I'm in a couple of places. I have a private Facebook group, and you can find that by just going to elementaryliteracylessons.com. I'm also on Instagram quite a bit. You could DM me. That's coach_from-the-couch. And then I have a website. It's coachfromthecouch.com, where you'll find all the things. So
amazing. And we're going to have all your links in the show notes as well.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Michelle, thank you so much for your time. This was a real pleasure, an eye-opening experience, an eye-opening, conversation about reading literacy and where we're going, where we're heading with this whole reading thing. Reading's important, turns out, but as everything evolves, so is reading. And I can't wait to see, and I'm a little bit afraid to see where we're going with this whole.
That's why I'm here. I'll help you.
That's amazing. All right, Michelle, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
That's our show for today. Share this episode with your teacher friends who might benefit from listening to it. Don't forget to rate this episode and subscribe. I'm Ramis Takawi, and this is Legendary Educator. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you next time.